Seeing an old photo rarely happens on purpose. It usually appears in small moments, like when you are scrolling through your phone without really paying attention, or when a folder opens that you had forgotten existed. One picture appears on the screen, and suddenly time stops for a moment longer than expected. The photo looks ordinary at first. Nothing dramatic is happening in it. Just a familiar face, a place you once stood, a moment that once passed quietly without realizing it would be remembered later. But something about it feels different now. The person in the photo looks familiar, yet slightly distant. Almost like someone you used to know rather than someone you still are. Sometimes the difference is subtle. A younger expression, a certain kind of ease in the way the person stands, a kind of openness in the eyes that is difficult to describe but easy to recognize. The room in the photo might be the same one you still live in. The street might still exist exactly as it did then, but the life around that moment has shifted in ways the photo cannot show. You might zoom in on the image for no particular reason, looking closer at small details that once meant nothing. The clothes you wore, the way your hair looked, the objects sitting quietly in the background. None of those things seemed important when the photo was taken, yet now they feel strangely meaningful, as if they belong to a version of life that moved forward without asking permission. There is often a quiet pause after seeing a photo like this. Not a dramatic, emotional reaction, just a small stillness. The kind that happens when the mind briefly realizes how different things are now compared to what once felt normal. It is strange how photographs do that. They do not explain anything. They do not tell stories. They simply show a frozen second of life exactly as it was. And yet, looking at them now can make the present feel slightly unfamiliar, because the photo is not only showing a place or a moment, it is quietly revealing a person who existed at that time. Someone who believed certain things about the future. Someone who had not yet experienced the days that would come afterward. And sometimes the most noticeable part is not the setting or the moment itself. It is the realization that the person in that picture once looked at the future and imagined something slightly different than the life that eventually unfolded. Photos rarely feel important when they are taken. Most of them happen during normal days that do not seem particularly meaningful at the time. A quick picture with friends during a lunch break, a casual photo taken while walking somewhere familiar, a moment captured simply because someone said, "Wait, let me take a picture." At the time, those photos feel almost unnecessary. Just another image added to thousands of others that quietly collect inside phones and computers. Life continues immediately afterward. Conversations continue. Work resumes. The day moves forward without any sense that the moment just captured might someday feel different. But years later, those same images begin to carry a quiet weight. Not because the moment itself was extraordinary, but because the distance between then and now slowly becomes visible. Sometimes the difference shows up in small ways. The place in the background of the photo might no longer exist. A cafe that closed, an office that moved, a street that changed its buildings and signs. Even if the location still exists, the way you move through it might feel different now. Other times, the difference is more personal. The people in the photo might still be in your life, but the relationships have shifted slightly. Conversations that once happened every day might now happen only occasionally. Some friendships remain, but they feel quieter than before. Others may have slowly faded in ways that no one ever formally acknowledged. Looking at an old photo does not usually bring sudden sadness. More often, it brings a quiet recognition that time does not move in dramatic leaps. It moves slowly in ordinary days that rarely announce their significance. Most changes in life happen this way, not through clear turning points, but through gradual adjustments that accumulate over months and years. Work routines settle into place. Priorities shift. Certain dreams quietly move to the background, while other responsibilities step forward. The version of yourself in the photo could not see these changes yet. That person was simply living another normal day, surrounded by people and places that felt stable at the time. And perhaps that is why seeing the photo now feels slightly unfamiliar. Because the distance between who you were then and who you are now did not appear all at once. It appeared slowly, almost invisibly, across hundreds of days that looked completely ordinary. The strange thing is that most of those days probably felt routine while they were happening. Nothing about them seemed like a moment worth remembering. Yet together, they quietly reshaped the direction of life in ways that are only visible when looking back. Sometimes the realization does not come immediately when looking at the photo. At first, the mind might simply notice the surface details, the setting, the people standing nearby, the moment itself. But after a little while, something else begins to appear. It is the quiet awareness that the person in the photo was living inside a different understanding of life. At that time, certain things probably felt certain. Plans may have seemed clearer. The future may have looked like a path that would unfold in a particular direction. Even if there were uncertainties, there was still a feeling that things would gradually become clearer with time. Looking back now, that sense of certainty feels softer. Not because life turned out badly, but because life rarely follows the shape that earlier versions of ourselves imagined. Some things turned out differently than expected. Other things arrived that were never anticipated at all. Responsibilities appear that were once far away. Relationships shift into new forms. Certain ambitions lose urgency, while other priorities quietly take their place. None of these changes happen in a dramatic moment. They simply appear over time, like the slow movement of seasons that eventually change the entire landscape. The person in the photo did not know which experiences would shape the years that followed. They could not see the conversations that would happen later, or the days that would feel heavier than expected, or the moments that would quietly change how they understood life. And yet, that person moved forward with a kind of natural confidence. Not a loud confidence, but the quiet assumption that life would continue unfolding in understandable ways. Perhaps everyone carries a version of themselves, like this somewhere in their memory, a version that existed before certain realizations appeared, a version that still believed certain things would remain exactly as they were. Seeing that version again through an old photo can feel strangely gentle, not like regret and not exactly like nostalgia either. More like meeting someone familiar after many years apart and realizing both of you have quietly changed. The photo does not explain the changes. It simply reveals that they happened, and the recognition appears slowly. The person you once were is still connected to who you are now, but the path between those two versions of life contains many experiences that the photo could never show. Time rarely announces the moments when it changes us. Most of the time, it moves quietly through ordinary routines. Workdays repeat themselves. Evenings pass in familiar ways. Conversations come and go. Weeks begin and end without much ceremony. From inside those routines, life often feels stable. The same commute, the same conversations, the same responsibilities returning each morning. But photographs reveal something different. They show that while the routines may have looked the same on the surface, something beneath them was slowly shifting. The way a person carries themselves changes over time. The expressions in their face soften or become more thoughtful. The eyes begin to hold experiences that were not there before. Sometimes the difference appears in the environment around them. Objects change, rooms become arranged differently, streets evolve, technology quietly replaces older habits. Other times the change is more internal. Certain expectations become calmer. The urgency that once surrounded the future gradually settles into a quieter understanding that life unfolds at its own pace. Responsibilities that once felt distant become part of daily life. Decisions carry slightly more weight. The small details of life, health, family, stability, begin to feel more important than they once did. The photo does not show any of these things directly. It simply shows a moment when many of those changes had not happened yet. And that is where the recognition begins. Looking at the photo reveals a version of life that once felt complete in itself. The people present in that moment believed they understood their lives fairly well. The future looked like a continuation of what already existed, but the years that followed quietly rearranged many of those assumptions. This does not mean the past was mistaken. It simply means that life contains more movement than we notice while it is happening. A person rarely wakes up one day and realizes they have become someone different. The change usually becomes visible only when comparing distant points in time. A memory, a photograph, a moment that suddenly reflects the difference between two chapters of life. In that comparison, something subtle appears. Not loss, not disappointment, just the quiet understanding that life continues shaping us long after we stop expecting it to. The version of yourself in the photo was standing at the beginning of many experiences that had not yet arrived, conversations that would later matter, days that would quietly shift priorities, moments that would leave small but lasting impressions. Those experiences are now part of who you are today. And perhaps that is why old photos can feel both familiar and distant at the same time. They show a life that truly existed, yet they also reveal how much movement has happened since that moment was captured. Time does not erase the earlier version of us. It simply continues adding layers until the past begins to look like a quieter chapter of the same story. After a while, the photo is usually closed again. The phone screen returns to whatever you were doing before. Messages, emails, music. The normal rhythm of the day resumes almost immediately. But something small often remains in the background of the mind. A quiet awareness that life has moved farther than it sometimes feels during daily routines. Most days do not look very different from one another while they are happening. Work continues, conversations repeat, evenings arrive in familiar ways. It can feel as though life is simply moving forward at a steady, predictable pace. Yet somewhere between those ordinary days, years quietly pass. Photos have a way of revealing that distance in a way memory alone cannot. They capture the simple fact that life once looked slightly different, even when the moment itself seemed completely normal. The person in the photo was simply living their day without realizing how much the future would reshape certain expectations. They could not see the path ahead clearly. They were simply standing inside the present moment that belonged to them at that time. In many ways, that is still how life works now. The present moment always feels ordinary while it is happening. It rarely announces itself as something that will later become meaningful. Perhaps years from now, another photo will appear unexpectedly on a screen, and the person looking at it will notice small differences again. The way life once looked, the person they once were, not with regret, just with the quiet recognition that time continued moving, even during the days that felt completely normal.